But first, the Albanese government is stumbling towards the finish line in a disastrous final week of the campaign, riddled with arrogance, deception and scandal. From Penny Wong's defiance of a democratic mandate on The Voice, to allegations of foreign interference, to reckless economic management jeopardising our AAA credit rating, well, the spin is no longer papering over these cracks. Well, let's start with Penny Wong and the revelations today that she may want to resurrect the Indigenous Voice to Parliament. Never mind that 60% of Australians voted against it. This is breathtaking arrogance. The referendum result was one of the clearest democratic rejections in modern Australian history. Yet the government, it seems, doesn't want to accept the result. And Penny Wong, in a soft interview, casually dismisses the public's verdict.
Look, I think we'll look back on it in 10 years' time and it'll be a bit like marriage equality, don't you reckon? Like I always used to say, marriage equality, which took us such a bloody fight to get that done. And I thought, all this fuss, it'll become something. It'll be like people go, do we have an argument about that? They won't even like it. Kids today or even adults today barely kind of clock that it used to be an issue.
I mean, this isn't just tone deaf. It's contempt for democracy. Intending to resurrect a policy Australians overwhelmingly voted against reflects the elitist arrogance that defines this government. Albanese needs to recognise that Penny Wong has given him the worst day of his campaign so far. Now, there's this questionable claim. I don't believe it, but it's a claim the media keeps prosecuting, that she's the most popular politician in the country. But it's curious because if this were the case, well, wouldn't the Albanese roadshow have featured her more heavily this campaign? The reality is Penny Wong thinks she's a better media performer than she actually is. And she can't be trusted to stay on message. And if this is the case, imagine what she's saying in meetings with other countries. Penny Wong is notorious for not doing hard interviews, but to do this soft chit-chat with the Batuta advocate during an election campaign in the final high-stakes week, well, Peter Dutton took full advantage of her comments today.
You see Penny Wong out there at the moment talking about the fact that the Voice is inevitable. So under a Labor Greens government, we see this secret plan to legislate the Voice, and Penny Wong's let that cat out of the bag. Now, people will be opposed to that because they thought they sent a very clear message to the Prime Minister that they didn't want the Voice.
Now, you can agree or disagree with the Voice, but the point is there was a referendum. Australians voted against it. And having a blatant disregard for democracy is more in line with communist regimes, tyrannies and autocracies. And when asked about this today, the Prime Minister didn't offer an adequate explanation. He sort of cracked a joke.
Well, that's not what the Foreign Minister said at all, and she's right here, so probably not a great idea to verbal Penny Wong while she's sitting there. I'll just give you that.
Do you agree?
I'll just give you that tip for free. Ask any of the cabinet colleagues; they'll explain to you why that's a bad idea.
Well, Albanese, I'll give you a tip for free. You can't pretend she didn't say what she said when it was an audio-recorded interview. And then there's Claire O'Neill. The Australian Electoral Commission has referred allegations that the Hubei Association, apparently linked to the Chinese Communist Party, planned to supply her campaign with volunteers. And this comes after the video admission from Monique Ryan's own volunteers yesterday. Now, if this is all true, it's deeply troubling. Australians shouldn't have to wonder where campaign influence ends and foreign interests begin. As Shadow Home Affairs Minister James Patterson says, this could be a serious national security matter.
It's especially surprising that Claire O'Neill has found herself caught up in this because, as the former Minister for Home Affairs, no one in the federal parliament should better understand the risks of foreign interference than her. No one would have been briefed more often and in a more detailed way than her. She was previously responsible for ASIO, and so for her campaign to be caught up in this is especially troubling.
And then there's Albanese himself, who is substance-free and spin deep. And he was today pressed by Andrew Clennell on his onslaught of lies during the campaign. He insists everything is hunky-dory when the most reputable global ratings agency has put his government on notice that our AAA credit rating is at risk. And why? Well, S&P is concerned about structural spending. That's built-in spending. They're also concerned about over $100 billion in hidden off-budget spending and the unsustainable debt, which is going to hit $1 trillion next year. Now, a downgrade would hit every Australian with a mortgage, a small business loan, or even a credit card. And this isn't hypothetical. Albanese is officially on notice. And then it gets worse with Labor's likely co-conspirators in the case of a hung parliament. Greens leader Adam Bandt is already laying out his demands on Gaza, on so-called Islamophobia, and of course on Israel. If we thought the Albanese government has been hostile towards the only Jewish nation in the world, we'll wait until it co-governs with the far-left anti-Semitic Greens. And all this while, the Teals are imploding. Sophie Scamps tried to exploit the tragic death of a young NRL player by falsely blaming it on climate change. And she was forced into an apology today, an embarrassing one, to Keith Titmus's parents. But sorry, it seems, was the hardest word for her to say. Her apology, in my view, was half-hearted, bungled, and defensive. And it also ended with Sophie Scamps hanging up the phone on Ben Fordham when he didn't want to hear her ramble on about climate change anymore.
If there's any distress or upset, deeply, deeply sorry. That was never my intention at all, of course. Love and best wishes and deep apologies if there was any, sorry, she is upset.
And it went on, it got worse. The ending was worse. Now, this was a shocker. Now, Sophie Scamps's top backer, Simon Holmes-A-Court, has also been caught out launching condescending sexist attacks on women. He dubbed Jane Hume the nanny and a silly woman. He called Hume, Anne Ruston, Michaelia Cash and Maurice Payne crumb maiden. They're the most senior women in the Liberal Party. These are the sexist remarks from the spiritual leader of the Teals, which supposedly ran on women's issues and integrity. And speaking of hypocrisy, well, let's return to Penny Wong, because this is a classic. Now, you'd presume that Penny Wong wouldn't be a great fan of independent MP Dai Lee, who won the seat of Fowler from Penny Wong's fellow mean girl, Christina Keneally. And so Penny Wong has criticised Dai Lee for preferencing a candidate accused of racism. She said it's concerning that Dai Lee is more committed to supporting the Liberals than standing up to this racism. So that's Penny Wong there, again saying it's concerning that Dai Lee is more committed to supporting the Liberals through her preferences than standing up to this racism. But Labor is preferencing the Greens, who've repeatedly been accused of racism and anti-Semitism, and they're preferencing the Greens in almost every seat across the country. Well, where is Penny Wong's outrage about that? Of course there is none, because she has no moral clarity, consistency, or integrity. This is all dirty politics. And that dirty politics is working for Labor. The Prime Minister was cocky and arrogant today as he cracked jokes in response to serious questions about our nation at the National Press Club. And he's expecting to win big on Saturday. And so he doesn't think he has to properly answer questions from pesky press gallery journalists. And even when he was pressed on his record as Prime Minister and his inability to tell the truth, he just couldn't answer adequately.
You said we'd have cheaper mortgages. We don't. You said on election night you'd commit to the Uluru Statement in full. You haven't. And you said when you messed up you would admit fault. Now you say Peter Dutton is seeking to Americanise the health system. He's promising to match your bulk billing funding. Some of your ads basically say he's going to abolish Medicare. You say his nuclear plan will be funded by cuts. Your renewable subsidies and rewiring the nation aren't paid for by cuts.
You might want to come up here, Andrew. And
my question is, why do you have to exaggerate in this campaign? Why can't you win this election by telling the truth?
We are absolutely telling Australians, as Peter Dutton did on Sunday night in the Channel 7 debate.
And Albanese also won't say whether the nation is better off after 3 years of his government.
Are Australians better off now than they were before you were elected?
I'll tell you what the right answer to that is, and that is that Australians would be $7,200 worse off if Peter Dutton had got his way.
Good debating tactic to turn that question around, but it's not the question.
And got his way. That is what Peter Dutton has done.
Yeah, and Mark Riley from Channel 7 was right there. That was just a debating tactic. The Prime Minister, of course, couldn't answer the question. And that is the key question. Are you better off? That's what voters will ask themselves when they enter the ballot box. And the reality is Albanese took a small target, no-risk agenda to the last election, but then sprang radical left-wing reforms on the country without a mandate. Think sky-high immigration, a shift in foreign policy on Israel, environmental extremism, backflips on the Stage 3 tax cuts, and now taxing unrealised capital gains tax. This was all kept secret from voters before the last election in a calculated deception. And it's astonishing they've got away with it. And there is genuine anger about this and the cost of living broken promises too with mainstream Australians. It's why Labor is most vulnerable in suburban areas. The Fin Review's political editor Phil Curry writes today that seat-by-seat polling by JWS Research backs the internal findings of both major parties that a certain demographic of seats, outer suburban, mortgage belt electorates with blue-collar workforces, substantial commute times, high cost of living sensitivities, and in some cases, high crime rates, are behaving differently to the rest of the electorate. And the Australian's political editor, Simon Benson, says that while a hung parliament with a minority Labor government is most likely, he says there could be major surprises. And he says there are some parts of the country that are buying Peter Dutton's message and not buying Labor's. The question is whether it will be enough for the coalition to make the inroads it needs. So when the Prime Minister stands at the press club and dodges questions and cracks jokes and refuses to say whether our country is better off, it's because he believes he's already won. He doesn't think he owes anyone an explanation. But his hubris could come back to bite him. After 3 years of broken promises and radical reform, Australians just might deliver him a protest vote that's strong enough to knock him off his perch.